The series begins with Elvira, a journalist who writes about accidents and obituaries for a local paper in a small, sparsely populated town called Kilraven. We learn that ever since she was a child, Elvira has felt that death surrounds her because her mother died giving birth to her. Because of Elvira's fascination with death, she saw it as a comfort. Even as a child, it was always there when she needed to feel at ease. And since death was a rare occurrence in her town, she considered herself unlucky. When Elvira turned 10 years old, her father, Ward, started training her to use hunting weapons. When he told her to imagine someone who annoyed her so she could aim properly before he even finished his sentence, she managed to hit her first target. She hit the second target, too. But on the third try, she got upset when she thought she'd missed. But her father told her she'd hit an even better target. And as they approached the deer she had managed to hunt, her father saw for the first time since she was born that she was happy. And at that moment, Elvira was praying that this wouldn't be the last thing she ever killed. Elvira considered school a form of torture. But the two things that made her endure it were its library section on death and her only friend, Mal. When Elvira wanted to enter a writing competition, Mal was always there to support her, advising her to improve her style and use more captivating words. And if that didn't work, she should imagine the people around her in funny situations to help her get through the moment. So Elvira began to read her article, but instead of imagining her classmates in funny situations, she pictured them dead, because death is what always gives her a push forward. When Elvira reached her teenage years, she was forced to see a psychiatrist for her depression. She had to take a lot of medication, but the drugs made her sleepwalk and turned her into a zombie-like person, so she decided to stop taking them. 5 years later, Elvira's life took a turn. When the obituary editor for the town paper died suddenly and she took over the position, she became responsible for the town's death records. For her, it was the job she'd always dreamed of. We see Elvira finishing the obituary for the editor who died. Huey, the editor-in-chief, approaches and asks her to save the obituary when she's finished. Elvira gets up and asks him what she's supposed to do next. Huey tells her to wait for someone else to die. Elvira asks with complete innocence, when will that happen? Huey gives her a strange look and tells her not to ask that question again. He reminds her that her job is to write obituaries, to use the talent she believes she has to keep the dead alive through her words. She's not supposed to sit at her desk and pray for people to die just so she can work. So Elvira imagines that the next obituary she writes will be for Huey. Huey asks her what she's thinking about, and Elvira assures him she's not thinking about anything. So Huey asks her to get back to her work. 6 months and 15 funerals later, we see Elvira attending the funeral of a farmer who died in the town. We learn that the town's population is 5,000 people, and it's constantly decreasing. Elvira arrives at the funeral home, which she feels is a piece of heaven for her. She loves the peace, the quiet, and the human corpses inside. She approaches the farmer's corpse and touches it, very happy, seeing this as the only place where she sees people for who they truly are. At that moment, Tom, the deceased son, enters and asks Elvira to give him back the tip his mother gave her. He thinks her obituary was terrible and she didn't deserve a tip for it. He explains to her that his father was a farmer, and when he read her obituary, he felt like he didn't know his own father or that she was talking about someone. So Elvira gives in and returns the tip. She goes back to the newspaper and observes a journalist named Clive, a crime correspondent. All of Clive's work revolved around the murder of a woman named Maria, a case that to this day remains an unsolved mystery. Just then, Howie comes out and asks Clive to come to his office. Clive notices that Elvira is watching the article he's writing about Maria, so he starts mocking her because her colleagues think she's listening to the dead. Elvira returns to her desk, feeling embarrassed. She discovers that Howie is offering Clive the option to work freelance or leave the newspaper. Clive gets angry because they want to fire him so easily after 30 years of work. Clive storms out, furious, rejecting the idea of freelance work. Afterwards, Howie calls Elvira over. He explains that Clive chose to leave, but Elvira points out that he was the one who asked him to go freelance, which means no fixed salary. Howie explains he's doing this because their newspaper's circulation has become so low that he's forced to merge the agriculture section with the fashion section. So Elvira suggests that he merge the birth section with the obituaries. Howie advises her to improve her writing style first, so the families of the deceased will stop complaining about her. He offers to pay her $200 for every obituary she writes. Elvira is shocked that he won't give her a fixed salary. He assures her that he'll evaluate her work later. But Elvira explains that in this town, only about one person dies every 10 days, and sometimes she has to wait weeks for someone to die. And she helps her father with expenses. Howie advises her to be happy that she's at least still working as a journalist. Elvira asks him how she's supposed to live on that kind of money. Howie sarcastically suggests that she start killing people so she can write obituaries. Elvira confirms that she's thinking of starting with him. Howie laughs, thinking she's joking, and tells her to get back to her work. Elvira goes back home and tells her father what happened, upset because she won't be able to earn much money and will end up broke just like him. Her father, Ward, tells her he's willing to rewrite his CV and look for a job. And here, an idea sparks in Elvira's mind. She decides to write obituaries in advance, focusing on the person's life story. She starts choosing elderly and sick people whose lives are at risk, believing this will make the obituaries more sincere and touching. The families of the deceased will be moved by her writing, and Howie will give her back her fixed salary. So, Elvira goes to meet a woman named Alice at a nursing home. She starts talking with her about her life and how she felt when she learned she was dying. Alice tells her she's worried about her daughter, Rose. When Elvira notices that Alice has Alzheimer's, she convinces her to get her daughter, Rose, to agree to talk with her more. When Alice dies, Elvira goes to read the obituary to Howie, who deliberately downplays her efforts and advises her to try to improve herself more. So Elvira goes back and does an interview with a worker named Bob. When she reads the obituary to Howie, he points out even more mistakes and asks her to review it again. Elvira feels frustrated, and because of that, she decides to write an obituary for the kindest man in town, Sandy, who we learn has cancer and is in the final stages of the disease. Elvira finishes Sandy's obituary and waits for the news of his death. But days go by, and Sandy is still alive. Elvira watches him as he goes for his daily walk on the beach, full of life and energy. He passes by her every time and tells her what a beautiful day it is. After 4 weeks, Elvira is surprised that Sandy is still alive. One day, Sandy passes by and deliberately provokes her, saying it's a beautiful day. Elvira gets angry and insists that no sane person would think it's a beautiful day. Sandy gets upset that she's speaking to a sick man that way, and he throws her headphones. Elvira demands he get them back and threatens to throw him into the sea. Before he falls, she pulls him back. Sandy then tells her he's going to call the police. He starts mocking her, her father, and her mother, who died and left her. Elvira loses her temper and actually pushes him into the sea, and he dies. Elvira attends Sandy's funeral and interviews his wife Margot, asking her to share her memories of Sandy. Margot begins by telling her about the first time they met. Then she decides to reveal a secret Sandy had been hiding. She shocks Elvira by telling her he'd recovered from cancer 5 years ago, but he loved the attention. Everything he wrote about his illness was a lie. He could have lived another 30 years if he hadn't fallen into the sea. Elvira pretends to be shocked and cries, but in reality, she's happy. She realizes she didn't kill a dying man, but someone who deserved to die. Elvira returns to the newspaper and reads the obituary to Huey, certain it's flawless. But Huey shocks her by telling her Margot refuses to publish her husband's obituary because his body is still missing. Elvira is annoyed because no one will read her article and she won't get paid for it. But she leaves feeling victorious, not caring that the obituary won't be published. She has finally found her path and understands what it means to be inspired by death. Elvira is driving her father home, when suddenly a man in a huge car cuts her off and insults her. Elvira asks her father who he is. He tells her he's a contractor named Sylvester. He used to work in London but returned to town and secured many projects through illegal means, causing the deaths of 3 workers. Elvira realizes her father is her first muse. She decides Sylvester's name will grace the next obituary because she believes he deserves to die. Elvira goes to watch Sylvester and is surprised to see her friend Mal get into the car with him. The next day, Elvira meets with Mal, who tells her about her relationship with Sylvester. Mal reveals that he has epilepsy and often has seizures when he forgets to take his medication. Elvira decides to watch Sylvester's house. She manages to get to his medicine bottle and replaces the pills with narcotics. The next day, she returns to the newspaper, planning the time of his death. Suddenly, her new colleague Emerson appears and asks her how she does it. She gets nervous and asks, "Do what?" He tells her she has a strange ability to get dying people and their families to talk to her when they're at their worst. Elvira explains that people are exhausted by death, and she gives them a sedative so they don't take their deepest secrets to the grave. Emerson introduces himself, surprised that she makes a living from death. But Elvira explains that the first 2 lines of an obituary are about death and the rest is a celebration of what they did in their lives. Emerson tells her he's the new crime correspondent taking Clive's place and asks her out. Elvira immediately agrees as she's attracted to him. That night, Elvira arrives at the bar to meet Emerson and is shocked to find that Mal has already met him and is sitting with him. When he gets up to get her a drink, Mal thanks her, saying she knew she'd meet someone better than Sylvester. And by chance, Emerson just appeared. Elvira tries to convince her he's not the right person because he might be married. When Emerson returns, Mal asks him if he's married. He says he's not. Elvira then asks him why he chose journalism. He tells them that when he was 9 years old, he witnessed a murder. He attended the funeral of his 6-year-old cousin who drowned in the sea, and that cousin had a twin brother. For a reason he doesn't understand, his aunt and uncle decided to dress both boys in the same clothes. And because Emerson talks about death, Elvira becomes even more fascinated by him. Emerson continues, saying his cousin was standing next to him, which he couldn't understand since they'd just buried him, to the point where he thought he was a ghost. And when he went back and told his friends, they all got scared and had nightmares. And from that moment on, he was convinced his work had to be about strange stories. So Elvira tells him that Mal was once accused in an assault case. Emerson shows his admiration for her and decides to write a story about her. Elvira gets annoyed and wishes she could kill her. Elvira leaves and waits for Sylvester outside the bar. Her plan is for him to go in and fight with Mal, and when he comes out, she'll kill him. But Sylvester sees the police car and decides to run. The policewoman approaches Elvira and notices she's nervous, so she decides to search the car. Elvira gets even more nervous because she has the knife she was planning to kill with in the trunk of her car. By chance, Elvira realizes the officer is Rose, the daughter of Alice, whose obituary she wrote. So she starts talking about her mother to distract her, and her plan actually works. The next morning, Emerson goes to meet Clive at the place where Maria was killed. He hands him the case files so he can take over for him, and tells him that Mal was the last person to see Maria before the incident. He promises that if he can find the killer, he'll give him half of his life savings. But if he can't do it while alive, he won't get anything. Then we see Elvira driving her father when Tom suddenly appears in front of them. Ward tells her Tom is suing his brother over the inheritance, even though their father was actually poor. And here, Elvira is certain that Tom also deserves to die. Elvira arrives at the newspaper, goes in to see Huey, and asks him to restore her salary. Huey informs her that flu season is approaching, which will be a very suitable time for her work. Elvira realizes he's not going to restore her salary. Huey hands her an envelope with a bonus and tells her he'll pay her for Sandy's obituary because her work on it was good, even if it wasn't published. Elvira is shocked that the envelope only has a bonus for 2 articles. Huey asks her if she's heard about Sylvester. Elvira assures him it's the first time she's heard that name. So Huey tells her that he died today. Elvira discovers that he might have died because of the medicine she switched. And she feels a sense of victory because she was the reason for his death. So Huey asks her to write a suitable obituary for him. Elvira asks him if he's still set on paying her $200 for the obituary. Huey confirms that he's doing it on purpose to make her a good journalist. Elvira thinks that in this way, he's causing a disaster in the town without even realizing it. Elvira leaves, now seeing all the townspeople as just potential obituaries she can write for the paper to make money. After that, we see Elvira with her knife and the anesthetic spray ready to carry out her plan to kill Tom. She's arranged for the murder to look like a suicide and has hung a rope from the ceiling to make it look like he hanged himself. Just then, Tom arrives and Elvira is eager. She feels she gave him many chances, but he proved he doesn't deserve to live. She sees this as the perfect time to find her happiness and also get a bonus from work. But Tom gets a call from his mother and he assures her he won't give the inheritance to his brother because he considers the land and livestock his own. Suddenly, Tom decides to change his route and go meet his mother. Elvira gets annoyed because her chance to kill him is gone. She returns to the newspaper, convinced that Tom's death is inevitable. It's no problem if it's delayed a bit, and her happiness along with it. At that moment, Emerson arrives and hands her a letter that was delivered to him by mistake. She opens it. Elvira opens the letter and is surprised to find a reprimand from a reader, but it's anonymous. Elvira remembers her father is collecting his benefits from the post office today, so she decides to rush over and take him home. Meanwhile, Ward is at the post office. Before the post office clerk, Veronica, gives him his benefits, she scolds him, shaming him for being content with begging from the government. She advises him to do something with his life instead of being unemployed. He agrees with her, takes his money, and leaves. That night, Ward reads the letter Elvira received and laughs. Elvira is surprised he's laughing at the insulting words written to her. He explains that he's laughing at the way the letter was written. He points out that the person writing it dropped breadcrumbs on the paper. Suddenly, he gets up to go to the bar, but Elvira reminds him he has no money for a drink. Ward tells her he's not going to pay anyway. He advises her to go into the room with the memory boxes to find the person who wrote the letter. Elvira goes into the room with the memory boxes and starts searching until she finds her mother's notebook. Elvira flips through the notebook and discovers that most of the town's residents wrote memories of her mother in it. She compares the handwriting to the writing in the letter until she notices that someone named Andrew has handwriting very similar to the letters. The next day, an angry Elvira arrives at Andrew's house. She meets his wife, asks for him, and tells her he wrote her a very nasty letter. Andrew's wife is surprised, certain her husband did no such thing. So Elvira decides to barge into the house to confront him. When she gets inside, she's shocked to see that Andrew is paralyzed and in a wheelchair. His wife confirms that he hasn't been able to write for years. Elvira gets flustered and apologizes for her behavior. She goes back to the notebook and discovers the handwriting and style match a writer named Peggy. She decides to stake her out to confirm her suspicions and see how Peggy spends her day. Peggy arrives at the restaurant where she has lunch every day. Elvira talks to the waitress, Tony, She learns that Peggy orders the same bowl of soup every day and it takes her an hour to finish it because of her hiccups. Tony explains that Peggy has a heart condition, but she has no heart. It's clear Tony is annoyed with her because she's racist and, even worse, never tips. Elvira decides to use the hour Peggy is busy with her soup to go to her house and find what she's looking for. Sure enough, Elvira confirms Peggy wrote the letter when she finds matching paper on her desk. Suddenly, she hears someone enter the house and discovers it's a young man with Down syndrome named Bill. Elvira returns home and convinces her father that she burned the letter. She tells him she met a young man with Down syndrome named Bill who buys groceries and delivers them to an old woman, and she feels he's better than her. He laughs and explains that Bill isn't doing it willingly. He accidentally broke Peggy's window, and since his mother is poor and doesn't work, Peggy forced him to bring her groceries every day to pay for the window. Elvira is now convinced that Peggy is a malicious person who deserves to die. Elvira starts planning to kill Peggy, but this time, she doesn't want it to look like a suicide. She decides to imitate Peggy's handwriting and writes a letter to Bill, asking him to help her get rid of her hiccups. She sends him $150 to sneak into her house wearing a mask and scare her, so her hiccups will go away forever. Elvira imagines her plan succeeding with Bill. He does as he's told, but instead of getting scared, she falls down the stairs and dies. Elvira gets lost in thought, imagining she's written a great obituary for Peggy. She pictures herself walking into the newspaper office, her colleagues celebrating her, and Emerson confessing his love. The next morning, Elvira goes out to drop the letter in the mailbox. She's shocked to see Peggy walk into the post office, where she suddenly collapses and dies. She rushes over and tries to save her, wanting her to live so she can write the obituary herself. But this time, death triumphs over Elvira. Veronica thinks that at least they'll be rid of Peggy's nagging. Elvira arrives at the newspaper and sends Peggy's obituary to Huey, who calls her over. He's surprised she finished it so quickly. But he shocks her by revealing that ever since Peggy found out Elvira was working there, she was against her, and she'd asked them not to let her write the obituary. Elvira is upset because she won't get paid. She tells Huey she's broke and depressed, so Huey advises her to find another way to make money. Elvira decides to retrieve the letter she sent to Bill to get the money inside. Veronica assures her that the letter has no specific delivery time. Meanwhile, she had already opened the letter and taken the money. Elvira manages to get the letter back. When she gets home and opens it, she discovers the money inside has been stolen. She suspects Veronica stole it. Afterward, Elvira meets up with Emerson, who is nervously meeting with Ward. He decided to look after him until she arrived. Ward tells her he could have died at the post office, and that Tom saved his life because the office was the target of an armed robbery. Veronica abandoned him, acting as if all the money in the office belongs to her. Elvira realizes that Veronica was the one who stole the money from her letter. She decides Veronica will be her next target instead of Tom. Emerson starts asking Elvira what she's thinking. He learns from her that she suspects Veronica is stealing money from the post office. That night, Emerson goes to meet Rose and tells her he's gathered all the evidence. He's confirmed that Veronica is stealing from the post office. He decides to bargain with her for Maria's case file. The next morning, Rose goes to arrest Veronica but is shocked to find she has committed suicide. But in reality, it was Elvira who killed her. That same day, Elvira delivers Veronica's obituary to Huey and gets paid. Afterward, Elvira goes to the sea and starts reminiscing about her fond memories, killing Sandy and killing Veronica. Suddenly, a teenager appears and shocks her by saying he saw her kill Sandy and throw him into the sea. Elvira asks who he is, and he assures her she'll find out in due time. As he walks away, Elvira imagines the obituary she'll write for him after she kills him. Later, we see Elvira visiting Clive in the hospital. She shows him the obituary she'll publish after he dies. Clive begs her to kill him. He tells her the doctor said if he smoked a cigarette, he would die. He asks her to go out and buy him a pack of cigarettes. Elvira advises him to be patient since he's going to die in a few days anyway. Suddenly, Veronica's ghost appears. She's surprised Elvira is refusing to help Clive, even though she had no problem killing her. Elvira explains that she has rules when it comes to killing. She killed her because she deserved to die, unlike Clive, who is a good person. Elvira arrives at the newspaper with Veronica still by her side. She asks about the rest of the rules she's decided to follow for her killings. She wants to know if killing children is among those rules. Elvira assures her she would never do that. Veronica advises her to accept what will happen to her because of those rules. Suddenly, Dennis appears, the teenager who saw her kill Sandy. He asks for Howell, wanting to tell him a strange story. So Elvira asks if he witnessed the murder. Dennis says he's not sure if it was an intentional murder or an accident. Elvira feels like he's playing games with her. Afterward, we see Elvira with her father, who tells her about a woman he met in his alcohol recovery sessions and asks her to meet her. At that moment, Elvira gets a notification and discovers that Dennis is now following her. She feels like he's stalking her, so she decides to go and confront him. She asks him what he wants and assures him that she won't confess to a crime she didn't commit. Dennis explains that he saw her throwing Sandy into the sea. Elvira asks if he's trying to blackmail her for money, but Dennis shocks her by saying he doesn't want money. He wants her to kill someone for him. Elvira goes out with Emerson, who seems interested in asking her about Maria. Elvira tells him that Maria had the same job as her, writing articles about the deceased under a pseudonym. She suspects that Maria's husband is the one who killed her, which confirms Clive's theory. She tells him that at the time, Maria had asked for a divorce, which could be a motive for the crime. Emerson assures her that she's very smart. Elvira is pleased, thinking he's flirting with her. Emerson gets up to get her a drink, and suddenly a notification appears on his phone. She's shocked to see that Dennis is now following him too. Elvira goes to Dennis and starts threatening him, saying that if he continues to blackmail her, she'll hurt him. Dennis confirms that he wants her to hurt him because he's the person he asked her to kill. Meanwhile, Emerson is meeting with Clive, telling him about the evidence he found that incriminates Daniel, Maria's husband, as he's the only one who would benefit from her death. He tells him she was about to publish her book, so Daniel decided to kill her before she could divorce him in order to inherit her money. Clive calls Daniel and tells him the reasons why he might be a suspect in Maria's murder. Emerson is shocked and asks him why he doesn't think Daniel could be the killer. Clive explains that he met Daniel while he was undergoing chemotherapy and was certain he wasn't the killer, because when a person is on the verge of death, they can't lie. He tells him that if he wants his reward, he has to find evidence of Daniel's innocence. We go back to see Elvira trying to drown Dennis in the swimming pool, but just before he drowns, she lets him go. She explains that when he had the chance to die, he fought back, which means he doesn't want to die. And she assures him that she doesn't want to die either. Elvira tries to find out the reason why Dennis wants to die. He tells her that he met a girl online and sent her photos and videos of himself. Suddenly, he discovered that it was one of his classmates, Oisin, who was talking to him. He started blackmailing him with the photos and videos he had, to the point where he took the money he was going to use for college. He tells her that Oisin is related to Mal. Elvira promises to try and talk to Mal to resolve the problem. So Dennis threatens her. If she doesn't succeed, he'll post about her crime on social media. At night, Elvira goes to Dennis's house and blames him for the tweets he wrote. Dennis tells her that Oisin has started blackmailing him again and is demanding more money. Elvira suggests that he lure Oisin to the lake and try to get him to drink a lot so he gets drunk and he can get rid of him. Dennis is shocked that she wants him to kill someone. She explains that he's reclaiming his freedom, not killing, because if he lets Oisin blackmail him, he'll be trapped for the rest of his life. Dennis tells her he'll crush the sedatives his mother takes and mix them into the drink to make Oisin get drunk faster. Elvira is shocked that Dennis has been taking his mother's sedatives just so he can sleep. The next morning, Elvira, with Dennis's help, begins to carry out their plan. Once she's sure Oisin is unconscious, she moves him to a leaky boat so he'll drown in the lake. Afterwards, she gets a message from Mal and imagines she wants to meet to write an obituary for her cousin Oisin. But Mal insists she wants her to write an obituary for the dog she was taking care of, which died. Later, Elvira goes to the newspaper and is shocked to see Oisin in Huey's office. Oisin tells her he has suggestions for their newspaper that he'll get paid for. Huey then asks her what she wants. Elvira replies that she wants to know if she can publish the dog's obituary. He assures her he's willing to publish an obituary for a chair if he gets paid for it. That night, Elvira goes to Dennis's house to understand what happened to Oisin. Dennis shocks her by saying he didn't want anyone to die because of him. When he saw Oisin drowning, he decided to intervene and save him. After that, they started talking, became close friends, and he returned everything he'd stolen from him. Elvira reminds him that he put sedatives in Oisin's drink and wanted to kill him, just like she did. Dennis is shocked when he discovers she enjoys killing. Elvira explains that she's used to writing obituaries before the death and shocks him by revealing she's written one for his mother to threaten him with. Dennis breaks down and promises her he won't tell anyone what he saw. Meanwhile, Oisin arrives at Huey's office and decides to sell him the hunting rifle he and his friend found in the lake. We then go back in time 30 years and see a farmer working on the land owned by Tom's father. Suddenly, a storm hits, so he decides to stop working. The farmer enters the house of Tom's father, who is deaf and mute. He starts threatening him with his son to get money from him. Tom's father tells him he's supposed to finish his work to get paid. The farmer asks Tom to make his father understand that the weather is what stopped him from working. In the present, we see Elvira out with Mal, and by chance, she sees a man named George. He was imprisoned for murdering a father and his daughter and was pardoned after 7 years. Mal tells her he was sentenced to 10 years and got out for good behavior. Elvira asks if she knew him, and Mal says she was involved with Leonard's brother. Elvira describes him as a monster because he's enjoying his life after killing 2 people, and she feels he deserves to die. She decides to gather information on him, thinking he could be her next victim. Later, we see Elvira watching George and notices he goes for a run in the woods every morning for 37 minutes. That night, We see Huey meeting Emerson and asking him to return Clive's laptop in exchange for letting him do an interview with George. Emerson asks him why he wants the laptop. Huey explains that the laptop contains the police investigation into Maria's case and a list of all the weapons in every house in town. Emerson understands he wants to know about the weapons because the rifle that killed Maria is the key to the case. Meanwhile, Elvira is trying to write George's obituary but gets annoyed when she feels she can't finish it. It seems she's unable to judge George, even though in her eyes, he killed a father and his daughter. When she talks to her father, he explains that George killed by accident because he was drunk driving. Elvira decides to visit the therapist, the mother of the child George killed. She tries to convince her that she's suffering from a psychological problem because her own mother died giving birth to her, and her father refuses to talk about it. He imagines she blames herself for her mother's death and thinks she's the cause. But the truth is, she blames the hospital staff and wishes she could kill them all. Elvira admits to the therapist that she's tried many antidepressants from hospital, wishing she could kill them all. Elvira confesses to the doctor that she's tried many antidepressants. Some of them made her lose consciousness and caused her to forget important parts of her past. That's why she's trying to cope with her depression without any medication. She asks how the doctor was able to get over the death of her daughter and husband and forgive George. But the doctor thinks to herself that she never forgave him, and for every day he's alive, she feels like she's dead. But she decides to tell Elvira that after the accident, she got a psychology degree specifically to help others who are suffering like her. So Elvira asks for her help to be happy. The doctor advises her to try and retrieve her old memories. Elvira is shocked when she discovers she's forgotten a large part of her memory. The doctor asks her to talk more about her childhood memories in their next session and to tell her what used to make her happy. The next morning, we see Emerson showing the weapons log to Huey, who confesses he suspects he's the one who killed Maria. That's why he wants to check the weapon she was killed with. He explains that he was the one who asked Mal to steal her bag and lure her into the forest. He wanted to stop her from leaving, but he accidentally caused her death. He's determined to solve the mystery of her murder so he can feel like he has a second chance at life. Afterward, we see Elvira breaking into George's house looking for any proof that he's remorseful so she won't kill him. Suddenly, George returns to unplug the iron. He notices Elvira and asks if she's come to get revenge for the crime he committed. Elvira decides to attack him with a nail gun. George runs out into the forest to escape from her. Suddenly, a memory comes back to her. She remembers hunting her first deer and is happy because she's starting to regain her happy memories. During this time, George manages to disappear. He decides to attack her but then backs down and runs away, with Elvira chasing him through the forest. When he gets to the road, a car comes by, hits him, and he dies. Elvira approaches him, surprised that she isn't happy that he's dead. Then, Elvira goes to meet Leonardo. She asks him about something George did that no one knows about, so she can write it in his obituary. Leonardo surprises her by revealing that he had kidney failure as a child and George saved his life by donating one of his kidneys. Later, we see Elvira attending George's funeral. Suddenly, the doctor walks in, looking very angry. Elvira is happy, thinking she'll finally admit that George was just a monster. But the doctor speaks and shocks everyone by saying she'd wished she could talk to George to tell him that she had finally forgiven him. Elvira is visibly shocked, unable to believe what she's hearing. She gets up and leaves the funeral, upset that the doctor forgave George so easily when she believes no one should ever forgive him for what he did. Mal decides to confess that Leonardo was the one who committed the crime and George decided to take the blame for him because he didn't want his brother to go to prison. Elvira gets angry and blames Mal because thanks to her, she wronged an innocent person. She asks Mal if she did something like that to her, would she be able to forgive her like the doctor did? Mal is taken aback and asks her what she did. Mal gets nervous and assures her it's just a hypothetical. Later, we see Tom meeting with Ward, telling him that Huey is looking for the rifle he stole from his father 30 years ago. We learn that Ward is the farmer who used to work on Tom's father's land. He assures Tom that he was worried about his daughter and got rid of the rifle. Tom asks him why he did that. Ward explains that he was afraid his daughter would use the rifle to hurt herself. Tom advises him to deal with Huey to get him to stop looking for the rifle. Meanwhile, Elvira is visiting the doctor. The doctor decides to give her some of her cards to hand out to people. Elvira laughs, realizing the doctor's words at George's funeral were just a plug for her business. The doctor then asks her what she remembered from her childhood. Elvira tells her that when she was 10, she went to the forest with her father to practice hunting. Suddenly, Elvira remembers repeating the experience when she was 19, thinking it would make her happy. But the problem was, she was under the influence of psychiatric medication. When she failed to hit the targets, she decided to commit suicide. Elvira's memory flashes back to the day she attempted suicide. She sees Mal hoping she'll save her. but Mal decides to leave her and run away because she'd stolen Maria's bag and didn't want anyone to see her. Elvira finally understands what Mal was asking her forgiveness for. Back in reality, the doctor asks her what she saw. She tells her that her friend abandoned her and left her to die. The doctor asks about her feelings. Elvira says to herself that she feels a strong desire to kill Mal. 3 months later, we see Elvira trying to write Mal's obituary. Just then, Emerson walks in and tells her he's hit a dead end in Maria's case. Elvira advises him to do what she does, review his notes again and start over. Emerson tells her he met her father and found out Maria was at the bar on the night of the crime. He asked him what time he got home, and he said 11 o'clock, confirming his daughter was with him. Elvira asks if he doesn't believe her father. Emerson gets tense and insists that's not what he meant. Elvira lets him know she doesn't like his line of questioning and starts to play games with him to avoid giving a straight answer. We then see Huey holding a meeting with the journalists. At that moment, Ward sneaks into his office and steals his keys to make a copy. A little later, Elvira asks Huey to save her a space to publish an obituary this week. Huey asks her who died. Elvira says she doesn't know yet. Huey is surprised because she's reserving a spot for an obituary for someone who's still alive. He's even more surprised that she knows they'll die within the week. Here, Elvira decides to distract him, telling him someone is in his office. Luckily, Ward manages to get out before Huey sees him. Elvira arrives at Andrew's house. We learn she reserved the obituary space for him because his wife decided to go through with his assisted suicide. The wife tells her she can talk to him. If he blinks once, it means no, and if he blinks twice, it means yes. So Elvira decides to take advantage of the fact that Andrew can't speak and tells him about her friend Mal, who abandoned her and left her to die, and even stole the guy she had a crush on. She asks him if she should kill her. Andrew blinks twice, and Elvira understands he's encouraging her to kill Mal. Meanwhile, Ward manages to sneak into Huey's house and discovers he was in love with Maria and had sent her love letters. That night, we see Elvira watching Mal's house. Her memory flashes back, and she remembers that Mal was the one who defended her when the girls at school were bullying her. She realizes she can't kill her friend. The next morning, Rose decides to arrest Mal because after checking Sylvester's phone records, she discovered they were in a relationship and that she'd sent him a message on the day of his death to meet her. Mal insists she had no relationship with Sylvester other than renting the house she lives in from him. She tries to convince her that she wasn't the one who sent the message and begs for a chance to find the person who sent it from her phone and make them confess. That night, Mal decides to invite Elvira to her house. Elvira enters happy and thanks her for inviting her into her home. Elvira gets closer to a picture of Mal and her mother. She tells Mal she understands her grief over losing her mother and confesses that she also developed a tendency to steal after her own mother died. So much so that she decided to steal Emerson from her the first day they met, even though she knew Mal had a crush on him. Then, Mal starts pressuring Elvira to admit she's the one who sent the message from her phone to Sylvester. Elvira gets nervous and goes into the bathroom. She decides to get rid of Mal because she's discovered the truth. Elvira comes out and suggests to Mal that they order food. She's deliberate in ordering something with nuts because she knows Mal has a severe allergy and could die if she eats them. Elvira decides to leave her plate and go back to the bathroom, certain that Mal will eat from it. But then, Elvira realizes she can't just leave her only friend to die. She rushes out, but discovers that Mal has already eaten from her plate. Mal's condition worsens, and she can't breathe. So Elvira runs to her room to get her injection. But she's shocked when she finds Maria's handbag and her passport. She decides to take them and runs out, calling an ambulance to help her. A doctor gets on the line and tells her to make an opening in Mal's windpipe and insert a pen so she can breathe. Elvira starts to follow the doctor's instructions. At that moment, Emerson arrives and thinks Elvira is killing Mal, but then he realizes she's saving her life. A little later, Elvira goes to check on Mal, who is very emotional because her friend saved her life. She decides to confess that she left her to die. She tells her that on the night she tried to commit suicide 5 years ago, she discovered that Maria had been shot and was sitting next to her car, and because she was afraid of going to jail for stealing her bag, she decided to leave them both to die. Elvira is confused and doesn't know who moved Maria from the woods to her car. Meanwhile, Emerson is investigating a strange woman who lives on the road that leads to the woods. She's very interested in writing down the license plates of the cars that pass by and the date they pass. Emerson goes back to the day of the crime and discovers that Elvira's car entered the woods early in the evening and returned at dawn. Afterward, we see Elvira at the newspaper office. She's surprised when she finds the obituary she wrote for George thrown in the trash. And when she checks the records on her computer for the obituaries, she's shocked that someone copied all of her obituaries just 2 days ago. At that moment, Huey arrives, and she starts to suspect him, and we go back to January 6th, 2018. We see Maria blaming Huey because he wants to divorce his wife and be with her. Even though what they had was just a casual affair, she shocks him by deciding to leave the country and travel to Germany. At that time, Huey left, gave money to Mal, and asked her to steal Maria's bag and burn everything inside it. And when Maria tried to get her bag back from Mal and followed her into the woods, she was hit by a stray bullet from Elvira's rifle. Mal got closer to her and decided to help her get to Elvira's car and save her, not knowing that Elvira was the one who fired at her. When Mal reached the car, she discovered that Elvira had taken an overdose of antidepressants and tried to commit suicide. So she decided to run and leave them both because she was afraid of the legal repercussions. When Wardle got to the car, he discovered that Elvira had tried to commit suicide and was unconscious. He opened the car's trunk and discovered Maria's body inside. He understood that Elvira was the one who killed her intentionally and then decided to commit suicide. And that's why he decided to throw Maria's body in the freezer to get rid of it and protect Elvira. In the present, Elvira returns home, and her father tells her what happened on the night she tried to commit suicide. She discovers that her father was protecting her and he was the one who saved her. Since then, he's become an alcoholic. Elvira decides to meet Emerson to clear her father's name. She tells him she looked into the day Maria was killed and found out that heavy snow fell for 3 days. She asks him what her father said about his return from the forest. Emerson tells her that Ward said he drove back, but Elvira confirms that her father walked back that day and left the car in the forest. She decides to make up a story to convince him that he came home, ate with her, got food poisoning, and she couldn't get him to a doctor because of the snow. So she took care of him at home for 3 days. After that, they were listening to the radio and were shocked by the news of Maria's death. After a while, Emerson decides to confess to Elvira that he's had a crush on her since the first day he saw her. So Elvira asks him how many victims he said that to. Emerson assures her that everyone has victims and asks her about her number of victims. Elvira tells him she has 6, meaning the number of people she's killed, not the ones she's loved. Elvira decides to leave Huey's letter to Maria for Emerson to find, to make him suspicious. And her plan actually works. Emerson finds the letter and shows it to Rose, who thinks Maria was considering going back to her husband and that Huey is the one who killed her. Emerson goes back to Huey's house and starts looking for any evidence that might help him. He accidentally discovers that Maria's passport has been thrown into the fish tank. Meanwhile, Huey goes to meet Rose and tells her he has something that will surprise her. He shows her Sylvester's forensic report. Suspecting that someone switched his medication, he insists there's a killer in town and they're likely involved in Maria's murder. At that moment, Emerson sends her a picture of Maria's passport, which he found at Huey's house. So Rose decides to arrest Huey, believing he's the killer. Rose goes to search his office and finds the rifle that Oisin sold him, the one used to kill Maria. At that moment, Elvira feels a sense of victory because her plan to frame Huey is working perfectly. Elvira goes to celebrate with her father the news of Huey's arrest for Maria's murder. 6 weeks later, another person in town dies. Elvira attends the funeral and goes back to write the obituary. But she misses the killing and feels her writing has lost its flair. The next day, Elvira wakes up to find Emerson getting ready to go to court for Huey's hearing. We learn that she's in a relationship with him and they've settled down together. Elvira thinks about telling Emerson the truth, but she backs down and tells him that since she's been with him, the bad thoughts have gone away. That night, Elvira and Emerson go to have dinner with her father. Suddenly, they see on the news that Sandy has come back from the dead. He was found alive on a beach near Spain. Elvira loses her balance and has to sit down to process the news. When the reporter says that Sandy has amnesia, she starts to breathe again. Ward can't believe that Sandy has amnesia. Emerson quickly leaves to cover the story. The next day, Elvira decides to visit Sandy to find out exactly what he remembers. She's met by his wife, Margot, who is stressed and tells her the whole town turned against them after her colleague Emerson published that Sandy was faking his illness to collect donations. Elvira assures her she's there to help. Elvira manages to convince Margot to go out for a walk while she looks after Sandy. Elvira goes in and asks Sandy if he remembers her. Sandy insists he doesn't remember anything from the day of the accident. Suddenly, he starts attacking her when he learns she's the one who wrote his obituary. He thinks the obituary didn't do him justice. Elvira tries to convince herself to keep her composure and not go back to killing, but she can't. But she relents and suggests writing him another obituary. A little later, Margot returns home and is shocked to find Sandy dead and Elvira injured. Elvira convinces her that Sandy attacked her, mistaking her for one of the kidnappers. She warns Margot that he might attack her too. Margot believes her and assures her he won't attack anyone else. Meanwhile, Huey is meeting with his lawyer, who tells him he won't be getting out on bail because they've discovered he was stealing money from the newspaper, underpaying his employees and embezzling the rest. The lawyer scolds him for making his employees suffer, forcing them to do the impossible just to make a living. He also tells him that Sandy tried to kill Elvira and then committed suicide. Huey is stunned, and he finally discovers the link between the crimes he's been searching for. He flashes back to the day he suggested Elvira should kill people so she could write their obituaries. He snaps and begins to laugh hysterically. On the other hand, Ward is visiting Elvira in the hospital. When she notices he's been drinking, she suggests they tell the police the truth, that she killed Maria by accident. She's sure that doing so will ease his guilt. Ward confesses that he's always felt the dark side of his personality was to blame. Just then, Emerson enters, so Ward leaves. We then flash back to the past and learn that Maria was still alive. She had escaped from the trunk of the car and begged Ward to help her get to a hospital, but he decided to kill her and finish the job, and so we understand that Elvira inherited her desire to kill from him. In the present, we see Elvira visiting her mother's grave. She admits she's anxious and afraid of being caught, but when she remembers the kind of people she lives among, her anxiety fades. If someone were to come here, look at the graves, and ask her how many she's made, she'd reply that she's not done yet. Elvira walks away, certain she'll never be able to give up her desire to kill. She meets the gravedigger and asks how business is. He confirms it's going well. Elvira promises him it will stay that way.